So for the past 12 days, we've been looking into different aspects of culture studies और culture के relation में people के साथ जब हम लोगों के साथ जब हम काम करते हैं, we want to work among people, especially the indigenous communities के साथ. तो what are the different aspects that we can look? We looked into how ethnography works. We looked into aspects of field research, how to design a field study. अगर आपको कुछ भी research design करना है तो you can use that model. A simple practical design was shared with you. कौन से tools and implements हमको practically उसमें use होंगे, how to go about the entire coding, managing the data, analyzing the data, how to disseminate data, which are the organizations that you can look for to collaborate for your ideas. Online databases के बारे में थोड़ा सा हमने सीखा. We looked into a couple of case studies. We looked at the रबारे community, एक generally एक ethnographic अगर आप काम करोगे तो what kind of product, eventual product जो आपके सामने आएगा. So that was the case study of the Rabaris. We looked into a very specific part of one community, which was the art form of Rathwas. Pithora के बारे में देखा. We've gone through a couple of sessions to showcase the diversity of indigenous art forms. उसकी क्या क्या stories है वगैरह. So this is just take this entire session that we are going to have today as sort of a recap, and it is totally from a design from my own perspective, how I look at the information that I get when I'm doing field research or when I'm working with people and community. So the entire concept behind it, okay, how many different types of stories can we do? The stories last for eternity. वो it's part of our human DNA. Everybody can tell stories. Everybody has a story to tell. So that's the concept of it. Story can last an eternity. And what kind of stories can we accommodate, or how much information can we get? So when we're working with people, I mean, among people or in culture or in society or in individual or art forms, you get information about these particular aspects. Past के बारे में, artifacts के बारे में, knowledge, art, society, how the political scenario is, traditions क्या है, rituals क्या है, culture क्या है, customs क्या है, geography क्या impact करती है, environment क्या role play करता है, languages, we had an entire session on languages, what is the significance of language, and of course human relationships. So you get a lot of diverse information, diverse aspects of information. So moving on, what would be the first type of the story that we can start collecting or try to, when we are trying to understand some people who are new to us or alien to us? So we can start at the right at the beginning, creation stories, stories of migration, stories of origin of their names, right? So we've looked into these aspects. So basically what we are trying to figure out or try to understand, how did we come into this world? So that would be the first step to do, try and understand, okay, how what are the stories, or what does that community share to us when we ask this particular question, आप इस दुनिया में कैसे आए? So that is something that we can do. So let's take the example of the Saharias of Rajasthan, of which we had a small discussion. Okay, Saharias, through their traditional dance forms, portray how nature and animal kingdom would interact through their dance performances. So what would the story behind this entire thing? How did this all originate? How do the Saharia people come to this knowledge of doing this traditional dance form? How do they go about body paint? उसमें सारे different aspects हम कर सकते हैं to understand why Saharias have this particular belief, right? Then origin stories, we've already had this example. So how two communities get together in one particular origin stories, there are several different types of stories. So Bega and Badi community are related with origin stories, but with an artistic element associated in between. This Badi community was given creation or given life so that they can make tattoos on the Bega women. So इस तरीके की combination stories, combining couple of communities, you can get stories like that as well. Yeah, so this is this little gentle boy. He comes to Kaleshwari Mela every year with his father, and they perform Bhavai. Bhavai is a traditional dance form or a performance-based dance form of Gujarat. So Bhavai is sort of a conversation. They relate to different day-to-day activities, current events relation. So this boy every year he comes here, and this particular year when this photograph was taken, he was through Bhavai with along with his father was trying to showcase the importance of education for the girl child. Yeah. So this is an image of the person from Madari community. She is an excellent singer. Unka singing vocals is very different, very unique. So we can even understand how the musical traditions are also associated with various communities of our India. Yeah, similarly. Want to understand how Dhanabai Rabari gets all the knowledge about managing his shepherd. So he gets it from his father, who might have got it from his father, and so on and so forth. It goes back. Dhanabai Rabari manages the entire flock of his father, his own owners, and his two younger brothers. So पीढ़ी चार लोगों का फ्लॉक वो एक साथ अकेले संभालते हैं. It's an interesting aspect to this particular story as well, because his younger brother, Musro Bhai, he has also some animals in it. So let's imagine that they have around 180 to 200 animals at one particular time. So that might be 50 for his father, 50 for himself, 50 for the younger brother, and then the 50 rest of the 50 for this last brother that they have, right? So Musro Bhai has had a little interesting episodes to share with us. Sometimes when the drought is very severe and the animals become very difficult to manage, Danabai becomes very because basically drought becomes such a big issue that there's not just the shortage of water because there's no rainfall, there is a shortage of grass everywhere, even in the common grazing areas which these villages have outside of their areas. So there is shortage of grass in such an extent that animals भूखे रह जाते हैं. So in certain occasions, Musrobai doesn't like that his animals suffer, so he sells them. और वो किसी MNC में वगैरह वेल्सपन वगैरह जैसी कंपनीज में जाके कुछ काम ढूंढते हैं. But every other 4-5 months के बाद he again comes back to the same profession. He'll quit the job, he'll again buy some new animals और वो धनाबाई के caretaker में उनको रखेंगे and he again come back to that profession. So when we talk to Musro Bhai, why do you do this? So the answer that we get is some people telling me what to do and what not to do is something which becomes a very big issue for me. मुझे अच्छा नहीं लगता है कि मुझे कोई कहता है कि ए भाई तू ये काम कर, ओ भाई तू वो काम कर. And that is something we Rabaris who are totally free by birth, we cannot adjust to that lifestyle, and that is why I keep on recurring back and coming back to my profession. So ऐसे भी कुछ हम stories इकट्ठा कर सकते हैं to understand how people think. Right, so this is Bhura Bhai Rabari. He is the father of Dana Bhai Rabari and Musro Bhai Rabari, जिनकी अभी कह रहे थे. भूरा भाई रबारी डज नॉट मतलब वो हमेशा अपने एनिमल्स के साथ ही रहता है. इज ऑलमोस्ट लाइक 65-70 years old now. For the past 30+ years से वो शेफर्ड ही है. Nowadays it doesn't he has some issues with his knees. Okay, operations भी हुए तो still he does not go and stay in his home. He does not like being confined. उन्हें घर का एटमॉस्फेयर अच्छा नहीं लगता. जहाँ उनके एनिमल्स है वहीं वो खटिया डाल के सोते हैं, वहीं सब चीज़ करते हैं. उनके बेटे उनका खाना पीना सब ला के घर से देते हैं. Does not like to be at the house. Yeah, so this is an elder Aldo Rani ji of the Limbu community of Sikkim. The Limbu community is one of the oldest communities in Sikkim who were later replaced by the Bhutia dynasty. Limbus had their own kingdom called Limbuwan, very entrenched in the history of Sikkim as a state or as a part of the country as well. So we need to understand how the history affects the culture और दूसरे communities का interaction करके how the Limbu community looks at their own self in the modern world. So here again, to understand the Lepcha people and the youth of the Lepcha people, it's an easy idea to have a conversation with them. So for example, Penkit Lepcha दिन का आप अभी एक performance देखोगे कुछ down the line. So she and some youngsters have started an NGO, a foundation, जहाँ पे वो Lepcha community के बहुत सारे aspects पे research and documentation करते हैं. They travel all over the country performing their traditional dance to showcase just the diversity of the community. They share how their culture is. So this is how we can also look at them. This is Zongopal Leccha. He's the head of the organization that I was just talking to you about. A very well-spoken person, a very knowledgeable person, but it's just 23-24. तो उन्हें अभी से ही आइडिया आने लग गई है कि what to do, how to go about it. So research and documentation is something that they need to focus, and that is exactly what they are doing. So they are very active on Facebook and social media to showcase. They are continuously कुछ ना कुछ stories update करते रहते हैं all around their community. Yeah, so similarly, Gurung community कौन है, उनके बारे में जानना है तो you have to go to that community, understand that community. look into that. So Gurung Khas community and Nepali community are very closely entrenched. वो एक larger family का ही part हो सकते हैं. I'm just trying to showcase के 3-4 different communities trace their origin to an similar with a similar community. So Khas community, Gurung community, and the Nepali community, they have a common common sharing of culture and heritage, including some parts of their language. Their festivals are quite common. Yeah, so this is an individual of the Tamang community. Similarly, how do we understand them? So start at the beginning. How does the name come about? Where did they migrate here from? What is the story of their creation? How did they come into this world? Yeah, so we have several cultural fairs all across the country. मेलों का ट्रेडिशन हमारे इंडिया में बहुत ही प्रचलित है, बहुत ही फेमस है, बहुत ही अलग-अलग प्रकार के मेले होते हैं, जैसे भवनाथ का मेला इज़ अबाउट लॉर्ड शिव, जहाँ पे बहुत सारे नागा बाबा, अघोरीज एंड ऑल एवरीबॉडी ट्रैवल. So you want to learn and understand about certain sects like this who live a very ascetic sort of a life, very strict ascetic life, कि जैसे शिव रहते थे वैसे ही हम रहना चाहते हैं. So you need to go and to the places where they are instead of doing thing or trying to study or learn about them in a library or an archive or through YouTube. You will never find accurate information as much as when you go and meet them personally. So you want to understand how to become a Rangori, which is something that I have been planning to do for a long time, but I have not managed to do it. अघोरी अघोरी कैसे बनता है वो प्रोसेस जानना हो तो आपको अघोरी के पास जाना ही पड़ेगा. So that's the entire concept behind it. Yeah, so similarly, a Bhutia elder, she had performed her traditional dance for us. We had documented it, just कुछ snippets. If possible, I'll show that in certain down the line. Yeah, so this is a youth, another youth of the Gurung community who had performed Baramasi Ghatu dance form. It's a very interesting dance form. And the basic what अगर एकदम crudely एकदम simplest form में अगर मैं explain करूँ तो basically the dance is about a girl who wants to get married, and through that dance and through the lyrics she's actually telling her family members that now I'm ready for getting ready to get married, find a groom for me which is suitable for me. So ये पूरा उनका इस तरीके से होता है. Yeah, so this is the traditional attire जो आप थोड़ा और डिटेल में आगे देखेंगे. So what would come next after we understand how they came into this world, or stories of migration, or how their names and everything are related? So we can study or look for stories related to their history, culture, rituals, practices, customs, tradition, and society, kinship, relationships. Yeah. So again, little interactive question. Look at this particular lepcha house. It's a very traditional lepcha house. What I want you guys to guess is कि जो logs, जो wooden logs जिसके ऊपर ये घर खड़ा है, yeah, try and guess कि उसका purpose क्या है.
Maybe it's for the protection from the wild animals, so that they won't enter the house.
Okay. Anybody else?
Even from the flood, maybe like flood or heavy rains.
Okay. Anybody else? कोई और guess करने की कोशिश करेगा? So there's attack from animals. Then floods or nature से protection. Anything else? Let's imagine कि आपने ये घर अभी just एक सेकंड पहले आप उस लोकेशन पे खड़े और आपने ये घर देखा. So what would be your first impression? आप क्या guess करने की कोशिश करोगे? You should not guess, but still आपका first perception क्या कहेगा कि क्यों है? Curiosity आपकी क्या पूछेगी? एक दो आंसर और कोई करने की कोशिश करेगा? Yeah, okay. So yeah, somebody was. Yeah, sorry, I could not hear you. Okay, so I'll give you another thought behind it, और कोई guess करने का एक और hint जैसा देता हूँ. So the lepchas live in Sikkim. Now imagine the geography of Sikkim and take that as a clue and try and guess again. No guesses? Okay, so I'll give you the answer myself. It's a very simple thing. Lepchas live in Sikkim. Sikkim is a colder climate. Himachal के बीच में आता है, so of course there's a cold weather का climate ज़्यादा होता है. So there can be 3-4 different aspects for why this construction or the architecture, why exactly this style of architecture. So the first thing is snowfall. यहाँ पे बहुत snowfall होता है. So जो living space है, जो आप elevated living space देख रहे हो, it keeps it above from the ground level. तो घर को ठंडा जितना होना चाहिए उतना नहीं होता है. Secondly, it keeps it creates a space, एक storage space जैसा नीचे create होता है, जहाँ पे वो अपने animals या farming tools, farming के कुछ चीजें हैं जो वो वहाँ पे नीचे रख सकते हैं, जो that is the exact reason what they do. But this is all about nature versus nature, nurture versus nature. कि जो आप नेचर में हो, जिस रिक्वायरमेंट जैसी रिक्वायरमेंट है, उस तरीके का कंस्ट्रक्शन कीजिए, उस तरीके का आर्किटेक्चर कीजिए. तो स्लाइटली डिफरेंट. यू कैन इवन सी के विंडोज कितनी छोटी है. सो दे रिक्वायर वेंटिलेशन. बोबरे सर टॉक्ड टू अस अबाउट हाउ द इम्पोर्टेंस ऑफ वेंटिलेशन is. But in this particular region where it is very cold in certain parts of it, like 4 to 5 months, it's severely cold. It goes as high as minus में भी जाता है. So you can understand the shortage on the smaller size of the windows to avoid the inclusion of cold weather or cold winds probably. And then the entire location basically एक slope पे बना हुआ है. So you have the larger logs in the front and the smaller, it goes on keeping going smaller. You can also see, अगर आप प्रॉपरली इसको ऑब्जर्व कर सकते हो, तो एक ट्रेडिशनल हाउस है और इन द बैकग्राउंड मॉडर्न कंस्ट्रक्शन किस तरीके का इम्प्लीमेंट होने लग गया है उस रीजन में. सो यू विल नॉट बी एबल टू फाइंड दिस सॉर्ट ऑफ ट्रेडिशनल हाउसेस व्हेन यू विजिट लेप्चा, लेट्स से 3-5 years down the line. आपको ऐसे घर देखने नहीं मिलेंगे. So you would not be able, you might see photographs or something, but practically as it is right now, that might not be possible. Again, if you observe properly, the entire house is stationed within the field that they do. So you have a lot of banana trees, lot of different trees in and around the entire region. तो फार्म के बीच में ही पूरा सेटअप कर दिया है कि पूरी आसपास की जो जमीन है उसमें हम फार्मिंग करेंगे और बीच में हमारा घर रहेगा. So that's the entire concept behind it. Similarly, now look at this house. It's again in the region of Sikkim. Sikkim में ही है. It's the traditional house of the Mangar community. Imagine it is just a difference of around 100-150 kilometers between the two communities, but you can see the stark difference between the style of architecture, right? So the region in which Mangars stay, it does not snow that much. यहाँ पे snow इतना नहीं होता है, but still it becomes very cold. So the size of the wall are slightly different. You have very thick thatched walls, so that ठंडी से थोड़ी बचत हो. The balcony also, if you guys can concentrate on the just okay. Yeah, concentrate on this particular balcony. Balcony के सामने पूरी की पूरी cliff है उनकी. So despite the fact उनको wind से problem हो कि ना हो, balconies का requirement is something which they do as part of their aesthetics and something that they require. And in all the places in and around what you're seeing is small farms. वो जो slopes आप देख रहे हैं घर के पीछे के side पे, where the gentleman wearing a hat is standing, that is the farm that they have. So they grow palak and all those things, other things, cabbage and all those things, जहाँ पे उनको जो चीज़ ज़रूरत पड़े, छोटी छोटी farms सबके घर में होती है. I'll explain a little bit about how I observed the construction or the architecture of Sikkim थोड़े देर बाद. But I want to share something about this particular house. This is a 150 years से पुराना एक घर है जिसे सिक्किम गवर्नमेंट ने एक हेरिटेज का स्टेटस दे चुके हैं. They provide this family who has maintained this traditional style of a house, and there is no more like ये ऐसे घर. मांगर्स कम्युनिटी में अभी सब मॉडर्न कंस्ट्रक्शन हो गया. ये अकेला एक घर बचा है जिनके थर्ड जनरेशन से अभी ये प्रिजर्व हो रहा है. And they have finally started to get it recognized, and Sikkim government has offered them that status as a monument of heritage of the architecture of Sikkim in relation to the Mangar community. So this kind of architecture is something which would be very rare in the coming years now. Dhire dhire it will disappear. Yeah, so similarly, from the east to the west, the tradition of living their lives totally changes. Rabaris are a very nomadic style, lead a very nomadic style of life. So no houses, no walls, no ceilings, nothing. जहाँ पे आपका उतारा आपने घर बकरी इंस्टॉल कर दी, वही हमारा घर. They have पक्के houses in their villages, but they are totally just for the sake that if tomorrow we want to quit this profession, अगर हमें किसी रीजन से भी ये ऑक्यूपेशन छोड़ना पड़े तो हमारे पास रहने के लिए कुछ हो. That is the only reason why they almost have their houses in the house. A very interesting aspect about the रबारी villages में भी जो उनके घर होते हैं, कोई भी घर के अंदर नहीं सोता है. Whatever the constructed spaces, like let's imagine कि आपका फ्लैट है, आप फ्लैट में नहीं सोओगे, आप छत पे जाके टेरेस पे सोओगे. दे स्टिल डू दैट. अपने आंगन में सारे खटिया लगा के आंगन में ही सोएंगे, खाना भी वो आंगन में ही बनाएंगे, एवरीथिंग आंगन में होगा. स्टोर घर का जो क्रिएशन है, जो कंस्ट्रक्शन की है, इट इज जस्ट एंड जस्ट प्रिडोमिनेंटली यूज एज अ स्टोरेज प्लेस. तो अगर आपने 2 रूम्स भी अंदर बनाए हो, स्टोरेज के लिए ही वो यूज होते हैं. कोई घर के अंदर नहीं सोता है. गाँव में अभी भी वैसे ही वो करते हैं, बिकॉज दे लाइक टू हैव उनका जो सीलिंग है, इट इज सपोज टू बी द स्काई एंड द स्टार्स. They do not find it comfortable to sleep inside a confined space. Similarly, what do people do in the nomadic lifestyle? में custom क्या है, traditions क्या है? So why buttermilk is such an important element of the diet or their culture? How is it made? How do they manage to do all the fermentation? When do they do it? How many liters do people prepare? So on average, it will have 10 to 15 liters per day. Do they consume the entire amount that they prepare? Yes, they do. तो क्या ये सब सारी स्टोरीज समझना सीखना हमें ज़रूरी है, बिकॉज इट गिव्स यू एन आइडिया इनटू द कम्युनिटी how they go about their daily lives. So this is from the burning grasslands. Similarly, occupation and their traditional knowledge and the society, how they look towards themselves, camel herders. So this we are talking about the Fakirani Jat community. An interesting fact about how they go about breeding and taking care of their camel herd. So basically half of the day they will take them to the coastal line of Kutch, जहाँ पे mangroves है, और mangroves के जो tree fruits and leaves वगैरह होते हैं, it is considered very healthy for the camels. तो आधा दिन जो शेफर्ड होगा वो एक किसी मैंग्रोव के ऊपर जाके खड़ा रह जाएगा, खड़ा रहकर ही वो सारी एक्टिविटीज करेगा. वो खाना भी वहीं खाएगा, वो चाय भी उस मैंग्रोव पे बना लेगा, वो दोस्तों से बातें और चर्चा भी वहीं करेगा, टू मेक श्योर दैट वो अपने एनिमल्स के पास. इट्स अ वेरी डिफिकल्ट टेक्निक और वेरी डिफिकल्ट टू इवन इमेजिन हाउ दे कैन डू इट. इफ पॉसिबल आई ट्राई एंड शोकेस यू कि मैं कौन से मैंग्रोव्स की बात कर रहा हूँ, जस्ट टू गिव एन आइडिया कि व्हाट आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट. So this is how they do. Half the day they are standing mostly on 1 foot or something. एक पैर पे बैलेंस करके लिटरली खड़े रहते हैं ये लोग, so that उनके कैमल्स को अच्छा क्वालिटी का खाना मिले, और आधा दिन फिर वो बनी के बीच में तक आने की कोशिश करते हैं, so that they can return back to their villages by sunset. Yeah, so we've already looked into this aspect, different activities and different knowledge systems. So how do you pierce a camel? That is something कि जो आपको कोई टेक्स्ट बुक वेस्ट बुक में नहीं मिलेगी. You will always learn it from your fathers or your uncles or your elders in the group. So this is something all about that, how to leash a camel. तो आपको ये सब पता होना चाहिए. If you require the necessity है, आपके पास camel रखने की ज़रूरत है, तो camel की सारी चीज़ें जो भी आपको ज़रूरत पड़ेगी, that is something you need to learn. तो उसकी चीज़ें हम कैसे कलेक्ट कर सकते हैं? इट्स द एंटायर फोटो इज टेलिंग टू यू अबाउट दैट. ट्राई एंड लर्न कि क्या हो रहा है एग्जैक्टली. सो ऑब्जर्वेशन. अगेन आर्ट की रिलेशन में ही ये है, बट दिस एंटायर पेंटिंग डन बाय तामसीरांग परस्ते जी इज ट्राइंग टू टेल यू अ स्टोरी ऑफ द गोंड कम्युनिटी, जहाँ पे वो ये कहने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि एक समय काल में एक ऐसा पेड़ हुआ करता था जो बात कर सकता था. ही कुड मूव दैट ट्री, एंड धीरे धीरे अलग अलग पार्ट्स ऑफ द ट्री से उसने अलग अलग म्यूजिकल इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स बनाए, एंड ही गिफ्टेड देम टू द गोंड कम्युनिटी, जिसके वजह से दैट नॉलेज ऑफ मेकिंग ऑर्गेनोलॉजी, musicology and music came to the Gond people. So this particular tree gifted or gave that qualities or knowledge to the Gond people, and this is the entire story that is being depicted through this art form before us. Yeah. So we looked into the veterinary knowledge or how to maintain a flock. क्या क्या knowledge चाहिए होता है उसमें से health is an important thing. If your animals are not healthy, you're not going to make a sufficient amount of required income, and if you're not making an income, you will not be able to provide your family. So what are the different knowledge systems? So veterinary knowledge is something that has to be taught practically. It requires you to become very very observant of your animals. Like रबारी सिर्फ हमें हमेशा यही कहते हैं, हमको वेटनरी या तो सिटी के डॉक्टर्स के पास जाके वो स्टेथोस्कोप यूज करेगा, वो ब्लड टेस्ट करेगा, वो थर्मोमीटर यूज करेगा। हमको सिर्फ हमारे एनिमल को देखे तो हमको पता चल जाता है कि उसको क्या बीमारी है, उसको इतना सारा टाइम वेस्ट करना पड़ता है, हमें एक नज़र काफ़ी। बट उनको क्यों एक नज़र काफ़ी है? बिकॉज 24/7 फॉर द एंटायर 365 days they are observing their animals continuously, so there's a difference in that, right? तो टाड़ो के बारे में हमने देखा था, so I've added a couple of more photos in it. डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ टाड़ो जो मैंने आपको कहे थे, उसका ही एक ये ऊपर हो रहा है ना, कॉन्सेंट्रेट ऑन द बॉटम। उसके नोज पे भी एक टाड़ो हुआ है, सो द कपल ऑफ लाइंस आर देयर, यू कैन सी द मार्क्स ऑन हिज नोज एज वेल और स्नाउट। Yeah, so we also looked into that कितने different types के, so there are almost 10-12 different types is what we understand, but not many people in the community nowadays know about it. They know how to do it, but कौन सा style का Tado is necessary for which style of for which disease, that is something, that knowledge is slowly starting to get reduced. Yeah, so when we are looking into people, so कैसे शादियाँ वादियाँ होती है, so we already discussed that during the Rabari session. The relationship between the groom of the day or the king of the day and his bodyguard, and every how conversations can be done through him. So the groom is the king. So how is the entire attire look like? His entire attire looks like this, slightly better image than the previous one. So he has a sword, उसके पास सिर पे मुकुट है और वो उस दिन का राजा है, right? तो जो उनके बॉडीगार्ड है, जो उनके अंग रक्षक है, ही इज कैरिंग वट एवर ही विल नीड फॉर द डे। तो इन दोस डेकोरेटिव भरत के जो बैग्स वो कैरी कर रहे हैं वो जेंटलमैन, बहुत सारी चीज़ें उसमें भरी हुई है, जो भी उनको न सिर्फ पानी की बॉटल है, कुछ खाने की चीज़ें हैं, बहुत सारी चीज़ वो कैरी करते हैं। सो रबारी बारात जो वर्ड हम यूज़ करते हैं, तो रबारी के अंदर क्या टर्म है? तो जान आवे छे, जान जाए छे, वेडिंग प्रोसेशन इज कमिंग, वेडिंग प्रोसेशन इज गोइंग। या सो ये पर्टिकुलर सिनेरियो जो है वो बेसिकली अपने कुल देवता के मंदिर जाके कुछ पूजा करने वाले हैं। या सो अगेन आर्ट, फ्लोर पेंटिंग्स एंड म्यूरल्स इन समथिंग लेबल्स जो हमने देखे थे, इसमें ये फ्लोर पेंटिंग का है ढीगना। तो वो गोंड कम्युनिटी करती है, वो क्यों करती है, कौन से देवताओं के लिए कैसे स्टाइल की ढीगना की जाती है, कौन से त्योहार के लिए कौन सी स्टाइल की जाती है, उसमें क्या दर्शाया जाता है। ऑल दिस क्वेश्चंस कैन हेल्प यू अंडरस्टैंड various customs, various traditions in relation to the broader perspective of understanding culture, right? So we also looked at mangrohi. Mangrohi का क्या relation है societies के साथ? So concentrate on the image on the left, sorry, on the right. So भिंडी रेसानी दोरी, so it's a Rathwa term. It's भिंडी रेसा, मतलब भिंडी नाम का एक पेड़ है, not the भिंडी that we eat different भिंडी की बात कर रहे हैं। भिंडी के रेसे की बनाई हुई दोरी, and this has a lot of different uses in the community. It's a very very old technique that they use. भिंडी पेड़ या प्लांट जो होता है उसकी बार्क निकाल के जैसे कपल ऑफ 2-3 बार उसे सोक करके उसे सुखाया जाता है, सोक एंड देन ड्राई, लेट इट ड्राई अगेन, सोक इट अगेन, लेट इट ड्राई, और फिर उसके बाद ऐसी डोरियाँ बनती है। जो बॉटल है वो आर्टिफैक्ट नहीं है, पुराने ज़माने में राठवास व्हेन दे वांटेड टू कैरी वाटर इन देयर ट्रैवल्स, कुछ इस स्टाइल की बॉटल्स बना के वो दे यूज्ड टू ट्रैवल। सो दिस इज जस्ट टू गिव एन आइडिया के थोड़े सम मतलब सम टाइम अगो दिस इज एन नाउ आर्टिफैक्ट इन द म्यूजियम। दिस वाज जस्ट टेकन सो दैट कि ये बॉटल्स पे किस तरीके से करते, तो दे यूज्ड टू कवर इट एंटायरली, so the water also purified because of the ingredients with the nutrients that the rope creates, and it keeps the water cool. It has a very small that amount as well, but more specifically it has several medicinal purposes. अगर आपको बैक पेन है, जॉइंट पेन है, तो आप इस डोरी को अपने खटिया पे लगाइए और उस पे डायरेक्टली बिना चद्दर वद्दर डाले सीधा सोइए, and you will be cured in a short period of time. So it has a very interesting aspect. Now there is not many people who can do this. There are only very handful, आप हाथ पे गिन सकते हो इतने ही लोगों के पास ये बनाने का टेक्निक है। People know about this, but बनाते कैसे exactly, there are many very few people that know about it. So art and craft, we've looked much more in detail about art and craft, but again just to recap क्या क्या हम उसके आसपास करते थे, तो just let me tell you the story of Chatur Bhairat. Chatur Bhairat is a wood turning artist and a wood carving artist as well. I will call him an artist because he is an artist, but वो अपने community के requirements को जो भी चीज़ें उनको लगती है, he prepares them. तो he has prepared almost as many as 25,000 khatiyas for his community, more several more in different articles that the community requires in relation to rituals or ceremonies for weddings, for pithora की समानता के लिए. See all the artifacts that are there in front of you, जो भी आपके सामने चीजें रखी गई है, they are all made from single piece of wood without using any glue, any joints, nothing. वो single piece of wood की बनी हुई चीजें हैं, and that is through the using of his knowledge of wood turning which he learned in 1970s और 1980s से अपने खुद से प्रोफेशनल वो बने. He also knows how to make several musical instruments जो कि community में use होते हैं, and despite the fact now is 80 plus years old, he still does it on a regular basis without use of any implements which he has not created. वो अगर खुद ही उन्होंने एक giant 6 feet diameter का एक wheel बनाया है जो wheel turn करके वो पूरा wood turning का काम करते हैं. If you guys not know कि wood turning क्या है, थोड़ा सा उसका गूगल कर दीजिए तो आप समझ जाएंगे. सो यू कैन जस्ट अंडरस्टैंड के रिलीजियस आर्टिफैक्ट्स भी ये दिए हैं, कुछ और प्रसाद रखने की लकड़े की प्लेट्स हैं, महुड़ा का अल्कोहल रखना पड़ता है किसी रिचुअल्स में तो उसके पॉट्स है, ग्लासेस है, आप वहाँ पे म्यूजिकल इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स भी देख सकते हैं. तो डिफरेंट रिक्वायरमेंट्स जो भी उनको रिचुअल्स और सेरेमनीज में इस्तेमाल आएगी, सारी इंग्रेडिएंट्स ही कैन मेक सिंगल पीस ऑफ वुड. एवरीथिंग इज मेड फ्रॉम साग वुड. ही गोज टू द फॉरेस्ट हिमसेल्फ, selects his own साग ट्री जो इनके फादर ने ये की थी, सो की थी. वही पेड़, मतलब किसी ऐसे ही जंगल जाके जो फर्स्ट पेड़ पसंद आए वैसा नहीं, उन्होंने खुद ने ही जो उगाए हैं वही पेड़ वो सेलेक्ट करते हैं, उसका एक पार्ट काटेंगे, he'll prepare that wood and then he'll start making his art, right? So again we looked into Molela, but we have various different kinds of terracotta artists around the country. कुम्हार हम हमारे cities and societies में भी देखते हैं. Importance of terracotta and pottery community क्या क्या है, we all know about it, but we need to understand little bit more of it. Okay, what are the different aspects of it? So this is of a potter from the Modela village that we discussed in the previous session. Right. Similarly, how art tells you stories about culture, mythology, gods, goddesses, daily life. So we can study the culture and the society through their art form as well. Again, Pithora artists Lakhara hai ye. Similar example from the previous. What are they exactly trying to say through their art? Right. अगेन करम फेस्टिवल का पूरा डिस्क्रिप्शन हमने एक आर्ट फॉर्म में ही देख लिया था. व्हाट आर द डिफरेंट रिचुअल्स, क्या प्रोसेस है, कितने सारे एलिमेंट्स एंड एस्पेक्ट्स है उस सिर्फ एक फेस्टिवल के अंदर, जिसमें का एक पार्ट आर्ट है. सो फर्स्ट थिंग दैट we need understand is कि art is not just done for the sake of art as we do it or we perform it in the modern context. It's not contemporary art. It's not like somebody Picasso making an artwork so that he does something. They do it for a purpose and without a purpose they do not do anything. अगर ज़रूरत नहीं है तो वो नहीं करेंगे. तो ज़रूरत का क्या रिक्वायरमेंट है, वो उसका स्टोरी क्या है, वो समझना हमारे लिए ज़रूरी है. राइट. सो सिमिलरली वी सॉ खोवर. खोवर का रिलेशन क्या है, तो मैरिजेस के साथ है, तो उसकी स्टोरी क्या है, हाउ इज इट रिलेटेड टू द कल्चर एंड द पीपल, वी नीड टू लुक इनटू दोस एस्पेक्ट्स. राइट. Similarly again खोवर. Okay, so these are the terracotta horses that the Rathwas use as piece of offerings in their devstal. Devstal, I hope everybody now understands the concept of devstal. तो जो ऑफरिंग्स रखते हैं वो अलग अलग प्रकार की होती है. देर आर लैम्प्स, देर आर फूड के मटके में फूड रख के भी ऑफर वगैरह की जाती है. बट मोस्ट कॉमनली वी सी दीज काइंड ऑफ टेराकोटा हॉर्सेस. But one thing that we need to understand is कि Rathwas do not do pottery. वो खुद pottery के terracotta की चीजें ऐसे नहीं बनाते. They depend on this requirement to upon some other communities like the Vasawa community or the Varia community who are the pottery making communities, and वो ऐसी चीजें बनाते हैं. Rathwas will come to their location, buy whatever they need, and then they will go back to their villages और वहाँ पे जाके offerings करेंगे. So horses in this style of horses may have different purposes to fulfill. कोई एंसेस्टर के नाम से रखेगा, कोई किसी डीटी के नाम से रखेगा, तो या तो कोई शादी है तो पूजा करने आए हैं तो उसके लिए रखेगा। तो दिस इज समथिंग दैट इज डन ओवर देयर। दिस इज अ फोटो फ्रॉम द वाचा म्यूजियम एट द आदिवासी अकेडमी। On the left you can see a dhol around it। ये पूरा एक खुला म्यूजियम है, इट्स एन ओपन एयर म्यूजियम, and all the musical instruments in the musical instrument gallery are allowed to be touched, allowed to be played। आप वहाँ पे जब जाओगे आपको कैसा साउंड करता है वो म्यूजिकल इंस्ट्रूमेंट वो आप खुद प्रैक्टिकली कर सकते हो। यू आर अलाउड टू डू इट बिकॉज कि अगर आप सिर्फ म्यूजिकल इंस्ट्रूमेंट देखते हो यू ओनली हैव द नॉलेज कि वो क्या दिख रहा है, उसका आवाज़ कैसा है जब तक आप वो नहीं जानोगे तब तक आप उसका पूरा कॉन्टेक्स्ट भी नहीं समझ पड़ेगा आपको। बिकॉज वी हैव एन नंबर ऑफ स्टाइल्स ऑफ ड्रम्स और ढोल्स इन द कंट्री। हर ढोल का आवाज़ अलग होता है, तो क्या वेरिएशन है वहाँ पे आपको प्ले करने का अलाउड है। यू कैन टच एंड फील द आर्टिफैक्ट्स। दैट्स अ यूनिक कॉन्सेप्ट दैट द म्यूजियम फॉलोज। You can even play flutes or try your hand at playing the flutes, which is I've tried it several times and I failed miserably in it. So yeah.